Hey everyone, in this series of videos, we will be doing Analytics Activity 4. Before we do that, what we're going to do is go over this topic again before conducting data analysis, and then we'll review a few concepts that we learned from the first three analytics activities, and then we will add to our learning, in this case, concepts related to chapter 4 in our textbook, which is about data visualization. So let's get started. When we have a research question, so something like Analytics Activity 2, where we had this question about the hotel data set, when people were shown three promotions, which ones did they like best? So that's an example of a research question. And for data analysts, our first instinct is to go ahead and jump into analyzing the data. However, that's not always a good idea because there might be issues with the data that we're not going to catch unless we do this, where we explore the data. So, exploration. There are a few things we want to know about each variable before we jump into running statistical analysis on them. And this is something that I already covered earlier, but I want to go ahead and reiterate it. So, first thing we want to look at when it comes to these types of data would be to look at the range. Look at the smallest value, look at the highest value. That'll give us an idea of whether there might be any outliers there, for example. So, outliers would be data points that are unusual. Some might even say they're the weirdo cases. So, depending on what you're studying, there might be data points that don't make sense. And the example that I gave earlier was age. If we were doing a study on something that involves decision making on purchases, well, if one data point was a 4-year-old, that might not make sense because typically parents would be the ones making decisions, right? So it could be a typo. Maybe they were 24 years old or 34 or 40, something with the number 4, or maybe not even that. Maybe it was a totally different age. So again, it could be just from a mistake. And then the same would go for a maximum. If somebody said they were 192 years old, that's probably not accurate. And then the next thing we want to look at is how much data is missing. And I'll tell you this now, that's a pretty advanced concept as far as doing the techniques to deal with missing data. So when it comes to the examples in this class, there might be a few missing data, but where it's not going to be the case where we have to do certain things. But there are techniques to deal with missing data. For example, we might find the average for that variable, like all the ones that have a data point, and we will replace any missing data with that, if it makes sense. But again, that's kind of an advanced concept, but I just wanted to let you all know that, yeah, there is something we could do about that. And sometimes what we have to do also is get rid of the data points that are missing. And there's a danger to doing that because when we're taking a sample, we're already having to take a small representative sample of the entire population. And if we're taking out this and taking out that, we could end up with a non representative sample. And when we're trying to make decisions based on a non representative sample, well, that could prove to be disastrous because, well, it doesn't represent the population. And then the last thing we want to look at is what the distribution looks like when we look at the histogram. So recall from your statistics classes, you probably heard normal distribution. So that would be something, a curve that looks symmetrical. And if it doesn't look symmetrical, then it's skewed. And depending on the data analysis, we might have to do a few things before we could move forward. All right, so that is what I have for review. In the next video, let's review a couple more concepts related to categorical variables.